My name is Renee Lawrence. I'm with Hitachi Data Systems, and I am moderating today's panel. And so rather than introducing everyone, I think I'll just let you all sort of introduce yourselves.
Speak up.
All right, so my name is Gabriel Chapman. I am a cloud architect with SolidFire Technologies, based out of Southern California. We are based out of Boulder, and I'm here to talk about storage with the rest of my esteemed colleagues and panelists. Oh yeah, you can follow me on the Twitter at Bacon is King.
On the Twitter.
The Twitter.
Excellent.
I'm Pumla Schmidt, and I'm also known as Exchange Goddess. And I'm here to talk about storage. Even though my name is Exchange Goddess, I have a background in storage and server infrastructure. And I'm here to set these guys straight.
There you go.
Yes.
So I'm Joe Tucci. I'm the CEO of both these guys here to my right. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I guess I better not do that. Okay. I'm Calvin Zito, and I'm at HP Storage. I've been in the storage industry for about 25 years. A very original Twitter handle, Calvin Zito. And so I blog and focus on social media and communities at HP.
I'm Chad Sakich.
Not with those shoes, you aren't.
Right.
My name is Matt Cowger. You can find me on Twitter as mcowger. Calvin started at HP when I was in kindergarten, and I work.
And you left HP when not long after you got there.
I work at EMC, leading much of our pre-sales team on cloud architecture, things like that.
And I'm Jace McCarty. I work for VMware in the storage and availability business unit, primarily focusing on virtual SAN, vVols, those types of technologies. I'm formerly an EMC employee, and before that I was a customer for about 15 years. So most of the time that I spend up here, I'll be jabbing Cowger in the gut here. But you can find me on Twitter, Jace McCarty. It's really easy. Probably the only person here that has EMC in their Twitter handle. And I'm not an EMCer anymore.
Some of us are formerly EMC.
I avoided the EMC.
Okay. And I didn't realize this was a storage panel. I mean, really?
So we were going to crowdsource some questions, but instead we kind of put some together about 30 minutes ago. So we could either ease into this, or I can just kind of go straight into our topics here. So the first question I have is, so we've spent a lot of time talking about server virtualization and using VMware to provision and guarantee CPU and RAM resources. Where are we in terms of storage virtualization? How long will it be for us to catch up to where we are in terms of compute?
Who's that for?
Dude.
Yes.
I'll say yes, also.
In terms of do we need more time to catch up? I think, yeah, traditionally we do, primarily because there are still a lot of what we would consider legacy or monolithic storage platforms that just don't have the capability to become fully virtualized. But also I think storage as a platform doesn't always necessarily lend itself to the same requirements or needs that traditional virtualization does for server or network, right? Most of us, we want to provision a LUN, or we want to provision a unit of container to store our blocks or our information, and it doesn't change that frequently. And what you're really seeing most of the time now is virtualization of the functions behind it. So, engagement and provisioning, leveraging APIs to get things out there, PowerShell, integration with Puppet, all of these different platforms that we're using on a day-to-day basis as we move more towards an automated storage lifecycle. And that's where the storage portion actually gets its benefit in terms of virtualization, more so than, say, just kind of virtualizing all of your arrays and running them as a VM and then servicing up storage.
I think we have another contender over there.
So I can't disagree with really anything that you said, per se, but I think that and obviously VMware has done a lot of work when it comes to SPBM, storage policy-based management, and we've gotten to the point where as we provision VMs, apps, different things like that, even containers, if you will, nowadays, it's really important to know what requirements that particular workload has, right? And it's I think with SPBM and the introduction of vVols, what we're doing with vSAN, that type of thing, it's really got to the point where we've got a lot more flexibility and don't necessarily have to know all the inner workings of presenting a LUN and presenting different ways of consuming a particular array or NAS, filer or whatnot. I really think that with SPBM and the capability that we have nowadays of being able to tie a policy to a particular workload, it really gives us a kind of a level of virtualization, if you will. I mean, it may not be necessarily virtualizing a particular array, but it gives us more control when it comes to ensuring that we've got the right type of performance characteristics or protection or availability or whatever else when it comes to that particular storage.
I think I'd make the argument that nobody cares about virtualizing storage. They just want a reasonable set of APIs to manage it, regardless of what it is. I personally don't care about applying a policy to a storage policy to an application. I care about applying a set of requirements to my storage, whether that's it needs to survive this kind of failure, it needs to respond in so-and-so microseconds. I don't really care about virtualizing it. I care about having a sane API to manage it.
Yeah, and this was actually, you jumped in before I could say it, but I kind of question whether we actually need storage virtualization at all, too. The storage industry historically has gone down this path of trying to virtualize storage, I think starting in like the late 90s. And back then, when storage vendors were talking about virtualization, everybody had a different definition of what it was, what it looked like. And so at the end of the day, I kind of agree with what Matt said. And by the way, I think I won the lottery about how long it would take for you to say SPBM. And I said in the first 10 seconds, so I win that. Yeah, I don't think we should really be caring about virtualization per se, because virtualization is just a technology. Is whether or not you can manage the storage easier, set policies, and the kinds of things that we've talked about.
And policies kind of tie into SPBM, right?
Oh, they do, don't they? Well, they can, or they can tie into an array that has its own policy management.
I think you also want to keep in mind, it's like, I know we're at a VMware conference, same thing, woo! But, I think some of us on this panel probably run into situations where we're attaching to storage where there's no hypervisor, it's still bare metal, there are still all those workloads still exist, and they tend to exist at much larger scales than most of us are accustomed to. And so I think that you definitely still need to be able to bring some of the storage virtualization intelligence into the array and expose that out through common APIs and tooling to get it exposed to those other differing types of workloads that are out there today. I think a lot of us on the panel, we all hear about Docker, we all hear about containerization, Kubernetes, all of those cloud-based technologies. And I think several of us probably would struggle to understand how any of the storage backend is relevant and how we can actually integrate that into that particular technological space. And so it's like, those are the things that are interesting in terms of storage virtualization when I think of it.
But I don't really care. I'm a customer. And I honestly, I really don't care if my storage is virtualized or not. Just give me storage. And isn't it more complicated though? Because you still have to have storage in the backend.
Fries downstairs, we can just go get some disks.
Yeah, I really don't care. As an app owner, if it's storage to me. Now, maybe the storage guy may want to virtualize it, but I'm just thinking off the top of my head, it could be more complicated because now you're dealing with, you still have to have your disk, but then you're virtualizing it and you've got these different pools everywhere. I mean, to me, it's like, why are we complicating things a little bit more?
So I guess, and that brings me to the question about vVols, right? It seems like vVol is a per virtual machine storage solution, but at scale, how are you going to manage that and make it efficient and expose that back so that you're not micromanaging every single virtual machine and understanding where its virtual disks reside and whatnot. So when I hear about, everybody's talking about vVols and it's this technology that's been pushed for a long time, I'm still struggling with kind of why I would want to do it or why it even matters.
I would imagine somebody has an answer to that.
Have you ever deployed a LUN before? Because that should be your answer right there. I mean,
NFS.
It sucks a lot.
Please don't say the evil word NFS.
Tell us how you really feel.
Think about it. If you can expose from the array, you can expose per VM the capability of whether it be a particular SLA or availability or let's say replication or any of those type of those types of properties up to a VM, and you can apply a policy, and you don't necessarily have to individually apply a policy to every individual VM. You can do that at scale through, let's say, VRA or some other automation package or via API or PowerShell or whatnot. So I don't know if I would necessarily, argue that, hey, I've got to manage all these individual VMs and, that type of thing. I mean, I think most of us who, have had to manage large environments, find our, I'll say, DevOps tricks, if you will, where we can go and manage a lot of things at scale. To me, the really important thing is, especially, and I'll say the 4 letters again for you, Calvin, SPVM. I think is the fact that from a virtualizing storage perspective, let's say for instance, like I was talking with my boss the other day, and I said, what if we've got a vVol enabled array, and we're presenting some storage, and we make a request for X amount of capacity that is has a particular latency requirement, and we don't have that much capacity anymore. Now we can't provision and meet that policy. So we've got to be familiar with what not only our array has, but the policies associated with that. And as things change, we don't live in a world where we can say, well, I'll just apply a policy to it and it'll automatically work all the time, right? I mean, we have to keep in mind that we do have physical gear backing this, backing these VMs, and as different workloads consume more, whether it be flash or whatever tier of storage, it does affect things, right? But you can see with policies that, oh, wait a minute, we no longer have this capability anymore, and as a result, now all these VMs are now out of policy, right? So it's not necessarily just about during the initial deployment, but over the life cycle of that particular VM, and as you're trying to provide an application with whatever resiliency, availability, or performance level, right? So some could say, hey, it's a pain to go and manage each and every one, but I would dare to say that most people are not managing them individually. Maybe in a very small robo-type environment, but I think at scale, there are a lot of other applications, PowerShell included, that we can go and we can manage all of them very easily and report on them easily as well.
Was that a good enough softball? Was that a good enough softball for you?
I guess.
Good discussion. That was awesome. So just as a tangent to what Matt just mentioned, providing storage is half the battle. How can storage companies better facilitate the protection of the data and the workloads that are running? Feels like a Miss Universe pageant.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah. Providing storage is half the battle. How can storage companies better facilitate the protection of that data and the workloads that are running?
Who's that for?
Well, I'll start. So, there's a lot to unpack there. There's lots of ways to protect data. People have been doing backups forever, and backup seems to always continue to be a challenge that people still are trying to solve basic backup problems. Although I think there's lots of technologies that have helped make that better. I think that the things that customers need to protect their data are there. The way we do it is getting better. Technologies like snapshots and replication, remote replication. There's all ways that are out there to do it right. I think it's just making sure I think the starting point is having a plan and making sure that what you architect is going to meet your recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives. The tools are out there to do it.
I'd actually prefer to see, for me, and this is going to, God, I hope my boss is not in the room. I would.
He's watching on video, though.
I'm sure he is. I would much rather protect the data as close to the application as possible. Doing LUN replication, whether it's with storage array replication or something else, is probably my last choice. I'd much rather, if I'm running Oracle, I'd much rather protect my data with DataGuard. If I'm running MongoDB, I'd much rather protect it with the built-in sharding and replication in the application. Those kinds of methodologies are simply more aware of the nuances of how that data changes, how that data need to be protected. And so for me, the storage-based replications, while I think they're incredibly important, because there remain applications that cannot protect themselves, I think we will continue to see more and more applications that can protect themselves rather than that need protecting. And so then the question becomes more of how do we deal with various forms of copy data management rather than just individual replication and snapshot and backup kinds of products? And that's where companies like Actifio and Catalogic are starting to become more relevant.
I would agree with you on that. I think applications, if you have an application that can protect its own data, like Exchange, where you've got multiple copies, go with that, because you definitely don't want to replicate Exchange databases. That's just a big no-no.
So I won the Exchange lottery within 10 seconds.
Same thing with like Link. If you're virtualizing Link, it has its own protection. It has its own high availability. You definitely don't want to be doing anything in the back end because you're going to break Link.
The higher up the stack you can move the data protection, the better off you're going to be. I mean, essentially, the application should have the awareness of their own data and how they want to be able to access it, be it through local replicas or remote replicas, or having different zones in where the application resides for failover and whatnot. The data at the end of the day should be the simple storage component, right? And all the storage platforms out there today have some kind of data replication, data snapshot, data protection solution in there. It's just like I said, I think all of us probably up here agree that moving that application more that into that app aware tier is probably the better solution. Designing the applications with higher levels of resiliency into them themselves to be more aware of where the data is located at.
Also knowing what kind of data that you have.
Yeah.
Basic file, your file share. Sure, you can replicate that. It's no big deal. Print server.
I think the big challenge is depending on what you're running from an application set, whether it be Exchange or any other applications in conjunction with any other applications that do not have the capability of bringing that awareness to the application layer. You've got to find that happy medium, that balance of being able to accommodate for both, right? I don't think anybody particularly is, for the vast majority, is only running Exchange or only running Oracle or only running SQL or whatnot. Most customers are going to have a combination of a little bit of everything. And so you've got to be able to obviously protect Exchange or those other applications, higher up the stack, but also still have a comprehensive plan of action for just traditional, file or whatever other type workloads.
But it comes down to also understanding your business, having that relationship with your business, sitting down and discussing what's important, what do I want to protect? Do I need to protect the print server? Maybe not. Some companies, if the print server's down, it's the end of the world. So it just really depends on what the business wants, and take it from there.
So as you move to SDDC or as you start to incorporate public cloud, do your methodologies change?
I don't think they do. I think you still have to work with the business and determine what's important if you are going to do protection. I don't think it changes whether you're in the cloud or on-prem.
It does, I think, depending on the type of organization you are and the geographical challenges, right? Some
True.
organizations, there's data locality issues. Certain countries where the data has to reside in one specific location cannot migrate anyplace else. You have to have guardrails around that.
But wouldn't that be the same for on-prem too? I used to work in a global organization, and there's data in the UK that I could not bring over to the US.
But your policies, your policies in terms of data protection. So it's like if I'm going to back something up to the cloud, right? My SLAs changed drastically, and I just think it's having being able to plan accordingly and realize that if I put something into Glacier and I need to get it back in 24 hours, that the price cost scheme for that is going to be something in the magnitude of like $20,000 per terabyte, versus in some other alternative where it's not as challenging in terms of pricing and whatnot. I think there's a lot of people think that, hey, I can just back it up the cloud and it's gonna be great. Well, if you do have a geographical event, let's say like a Katrina or something like that, and everybody in your area did the same thing, how much more longer is it gonna take you to get that data back? So you have to be a little more aware and do the due diligence involved in determining what the right kind of, I say, cloud-based disaster protection or data protection solution you look at, and try to spread that out the same way we do with, I say, like T1 lines. I don't want to have all of my connectivity come from one copper provider. I want to be able to spread that out and make sure that I have redundancy and resiliency.
But wouldn't you take that same concept and do it on-prem as well?
I would hope so.
I mean, so in theory, it wouldn't really change, because you really should follow that same practice when you're on-prem or in the cloud. How fast can you restore your backups? When the disaster happens, let's say your first data center is dead, where do you go then?
Right.
So it's the same concept. It's just, you're in the cloud versus on-prem.
And I agree with you. I mean, nothing really changes. It's still customers have requirements, and whether they're doing something on premises or on-prems or where it's still a set of requirements that have to be delivered to the business. But to your point, there certainly are regulations that people need to be concerned about when they start thinking about cloud. But it still comes down to what's the business requirements.
So I would say that a lot of things do change from I know when I used to work for a large credit bureau.
Is that before they got hacked or after?
Well, no, they didn't get it. To my knowledge, they haven't gotten hacked.
No, you were
but-
To his knowledge, that
to
just
my
means that
knowledge,
they did
have
it
not gotten hacked.
successfully.
But the point I want to get at is we were under regulatory requirements where we would have to perform a disaster recovery test once a year, and nothing was streamlined. It was always a royal pain in the tail because we didn't. It was either too expensive or too hard or too time consuming to tie it into our normal business processes. I mean, it was literally a dog and pony show, with the lack of a better term, when it came time to performing our DR test. And I think businesses have changed with a lot of the technology that's come out very recently, whether it be at an application level or replicating VMs or stretch clusters or whatever. So I think some things have changed from a software-defined data center perspective to make things easier. And as a result, a lot of businesses don't really have the excuses that they may or may not have, in the past. I know that if we had, and when Katrina came to New Orleans, and I live in Baton Rouge, obviously we were praying, our fingers were crossed. I was actually at SunGuard in Philadelphia doing a disaster recovery test as Katrina was coming ashore. And at that time, Entergy, which is a power company in the South, they were literally shoving us out the door because they had to recover. And they were bringing in tapes and floppies and everything else. I think SDC has enabled companies to be more resilient and not have an event like Katrina or something like that literally wipe the business out. So I think it has changed some things.
What's a floppy?
Exactly. I'm serious. You should have seen it. We were taking pictures, and of course we couldn't post it to Twitter because that was when you were in third grade or something. But
Awesome. Okay. The storage is used to hold data, and the data is both important and subject to compliance requirements. How can storage vendors help make that process easier?
I can't hear.
Deleting the data.
I can't hear you.
We can't hear you very well.
Oh.
Can't hear you.
Try and repeat it.
Stand over here. The storage is used to hold data, and the data is both important and subject to compliance requirements. How can storage vendors help make that process easier? Lob that one out there. One of Jeremiah's grenades.
Yeah, well, that's a good Jeremiah grenade, and it goes to for me. I think we're starting to see certain companies come out that are focusing more on the content of the data itself, and not just so much the data. So you look at a Cumulo, or you look at a Data Gravity, or a Quadra, or there's a bunch of these. There's a bunch of these companies that are coming out of stealth gradually they're wanting to come in and say, we understand what your data actually is, and now you can actually classify it in the type of way that allows you to better retrieve or better sort for compliance reasons. And I would suspect that most storage companies on the market today are either looking at partnering with somebody who has that capability to integrate it into their solution, or looking to develop something of that themselves. Because the growth of the data that we have just seems to never slow down. And I always want to look at it from a standpoint of, storing data smarter instead of, just storing it.
I think I'd argue that classification in general, the problem of classification of things, is one of the hardest problems there is in computer science in general. It's something that humans are unbelievably good at, and something that computers are horrifically terrible at. And so at this point, I'm not confident that any solution can. It's one thing to classify data as a doc file or a PDF, which is an eminently solvable problem. It's another to say this kind of data is subject to PCI DSS and this kind of data is not. And so I'm not confident today that any storage product can do that effectively, and I'm sufficiently non-confident.
Skeptical.
Non-confident?
Skeptical?
There we go. That I don't know that I would trust any storage product that even said that they could do it, because I don't believe that the computer science is there to solve that problem today. I don't trust it on any platform.
Well, there's a human aspect to that. So when you look at compliance, let's say healthcare, and you've got PDF documents, you could have a piece of software that says, look at whatever social security numbers, and you're going to put it in a specific policy, and you can't do whatever with it. But what if you have a case and it's a picture of somebody? How would you know if that belongs to that particular case? Maybe it's a picture of a cat, but belongs to this particular file. Lawsuits.
Right, and that's
you just don't know, and there's a human aspect.
I mean, the only place you see that, it's like,
and so that's the point that I'm making. That I don't think that we have the technical capability yet to effectively classify and filter these things. And so if we pretend that we can perfectly, that kind of liability shift, and we're seeing this right to some degree with what the credit cards are doing. Target just made me use my chip card for the first time ever downstairs. At some point, we're going to end up with a regulation or law, at least in the United States, where if your credit card or your personal information gets hacked because a company had terrible data security practices, and they were told by a vendor somewhere that their software would classify this safely and protect it safely, and it failed to classify, that vendor is going to get that liability, and they're done when that happens.
Yeah.
An $80 million breach, that startup is gone. So I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Who in here takes a lot of pictures of their kids and just puts those pictures on their computer or their NAS or whatnot, and then always says, well, I'm going to go back and catalog that as this summer's vacation, or I'm going to tag this person. I mean, who does that? Anybody? Shut up, Colson.
Oh, jeez.
Shut up, Colson. I mean, literally.
I actually did that once, and then I lost the hard drive, and it was
Right,
like all
right.
that work I put into doing it with
Right.
Picasa, it was lost.
I think I've got like 180 gigs worth of images, and they seem to get larger and larger.
You only have 3 kids.
And? That's 60 gigs per kid.
Yeah, I see that.
Anyway.
I can math.
I see where you're going.
Now, if I started grabbing all the Snapchats that they're doing now, then it would be way more. Right. But the point I'm getting at is it's important as that data comes in, as that data is ingested, to be able to apply the appropriate metadata, whatever tagging or whatever properties or that type of thing. And until we do that, we're going to have a problem. I was talking with Raj actually earlier today, an EMCV specialist, and he was saying that he's actually scheduled to go to VMworld Europe, and he was going to try to. They asked him for his credit card, basically to email his credit card number, so he could get a room reservation. Well, DLP caught that email and basically locked it and said, hey, look, you can't send this. So
he just sent it to Google instead.
I think he did send it with Google actually, right? But the point I'm getting at is it's a combination of being able to look at that data, whether it be from a DLP perspective or some other heuristics when it comes to looking at that data, or from a manual perspective, us ensuring that it's properly tagged, and using some semi, halfway mechanical, good old-fashioned manual ways of keeping that data, appropriately segregated.
Of all of the storage metrics that are used to sell arrays, what is the most important and why?
To sell them, or that we actually care about?
Okay.
Ooh. I'd say we use IOPS to sell them, and what we should actually care about is latency.
Yeah, I think the workload itself tends to determine, the latency aspect. I mean, we get caught up in dollar per IOP, dollar per gigabyte, especially for those of us selling in the flash space, right? Everybody wants to get, down to that mystical $1 or $2 a gigabyte for flash storage. The reality is we should be selling the value of what the platform can afford the customer, because in the end of the day, if I can make that 1 terabyte of flash storage, appear as is 4, or give you the value as if it was 4 terabytes, then that dollar per gigabyte calculation kind of goes out the window. I always kind of like to think, it's quality over quantity, in that you can design systems to accommodate, a higher performing disk tier and a lower performing disk tier, as disparate addressable spaces to leverage. Everybody gets to that million IOPS. How many people in this room have ever even seen a workload generate a million IOPS? That was an actual legitimate workload, not something synthetic, right? Heck, let alone 100,000, which is fairly hard to hit with your standard, VM workload, right? So we get caught up in the architecture of things instead of the actual practicability.
There are people, though, that are running multiple applications off of a single array, and they do need that kind of performance. Because
I don't disagree with that. No, but what I'm saying is that, like I said, I can gin up pretty much any storage platform to do a certain performance of 4K 100% read random workload, because it's going to hit all cache and it's going to look really great. And the minute they put a real legitimate workload on there, it's going to take a crap, right? And you're never going to see that kind of workload.
Right, so I'll add, and I know that Calgary's gonna bust my chops about this. And Calvin, you can probably associate with me here, but I know how to drive a stick. I don't have a manual transmission in my car, right? I have an automatic, but I think in conjunction with price per gig, price per IOPS, that type of thing, the ease of management of an array is very important. The reason I say that is like when I worked at my last job before EMC, when I was a customer, there were only two of us in the entire organization who knew how to manage that storage. I mean, it wasn't great storage, it wasn't horrible storage. I mean, it fit the bill that we needed. It gave us all the feature sets, whether it be snaps, whatever else, But the issue was whenever there was a problem, they called me, because the only other person who knew how to do it was the VP, who had been the IT manager at one point. So I think in conjunction with that, but also ease of management is very important as well. I personally like having weekends back to where I don't have someone saying, "Hey, dude, we need to add some more capacity to this filer, and can you either remote in or dial?" I'm on the river, man. I can't, So in conjunction with that, I think from a rubber hits the road perspective, it's very important for anyone in the organization, provided the appropriate training, if you will, has the capability of managing that array as well. Virtualization with vSphere has made things very, very easy. Storage can be complicated. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. So I think that's an important factor as well, especially when you're looking in the small business space, when you're looking in a highly distributed environment, where you may not have the most technically adept people, that may have to do some work to that storage. I had a guy one time, true story, we actually lost power.
Hold on. Before you get into another story here, Jace.
Okay. You got popcorn?
Yeah,
I knew you would.
I'm good.
Anyway, lost power. Colson's heard this story, but we lost power. And I told the guy, go turn on the generator so we can flip the switch, because it was a very low-cost data center. And the guy went and started powering off all the UPSs, and workloads started crashing. And I asked him what he was doing. He said, "Well, they were beeping, sir." Right? That's your military, actually. But point being, it's got to be something that you get good value out of, you get a good feature set out of, but is also very easy to manage.
I think that's the challenge there, that's impossible to effectively measure. I mean, the measurement efforts that we see in the market are either some form of, I can spin up 1,000 VMs in 42.7 minutes, and then somebody else says, I can do it in 40.1 minutes, and everybody's like, oh, that's great, I don't care. And then the other one is, look, I put my 5-year-old on an array, and he built a LUN, right?
Didn't somebody do a VNXE on YouTube or something?
EMC has done that, 3PAR has done that, I'm sure others have done that. I think all of them are.
But with that being said, though, as an IT manager or let's say a CIO or whatnot, if I have to employ people that have to have a particular skill set when it comes to deploying and managing storage, that's an additional cost that I have to consider.
Well, I look at it from a standpoint of still trying to break down silos in the organizations, right? That's why I think we've seen, in a very short time, hyper-converged infrastructure take off to a certain extent, because they've kind of wrapped all of the, the virtual machine provisioning, the storage provisioning, the all-in-one super printer type approach, and make it turnkey simple. You create a VLUN, it's a right click and provision, and then you kind of set it and forget it. It's taking away the complexity. The reality is though, is that if I take that kind of all-in-one approach, if I go out to Fry's and I buy an HP all-in-one printer, because I like Calvin, I want to make sure that HP is here next year. But
I'll work for a different company next year. So
you got to work on
but what I'm saying is if I go take that one and that just may work just great in my house because I'm 2 or 3 people. If I go take it into my office where there's 300 or 400 people, it's just not going to be able to support that same workload. So there are trade-offs between simple and easy and the needs and nuances and complexities of the workloads that you're putting on your storage systems today. And and if there was a metric to kind of a sliding scale to kind of provide a number or a score to simple versus functionality, that would be a great thing to have. We just don't have it in the industry. So we have to go back to these traditional metrics like dollar per IOP, dollar per gigabyte.
I don't care. I'm a customer. I had 4 storage vendors come to me. They did a dog and pony show, and I had to decide on what storage platform.
That's a lot of lunch.
It was actually. I was stuffed. Lots of pizza actually. So I'm upgrading Exchange, and everybody came in and did their dog and pony show for me. Ultimately, I make the end decision on what we were going to choose, and it came down to ease of management. Cost was a factor, but not really. Ease of management and performance. Can your storage platform provide all the IOPS that I need to make sure that everybody gets their emails with their cat photos, with under 60 seconds?
Excuse it.
Right, but I think inherently though that unless you're actually putting the real legitimate production system on there, you're running a synthetic workload, a synthetic test, and it's never going to really mirror image the performance characteristics that you're going to actually put into production. And that's where it's tough because before I became Mr. Red Lightsaber and sold technology to people, I was in the very same situation. I would look at a storage platform. I had all kinds of synthetic workloads like VDBench and FIO and Iometer and all these things. And I would read Calvin's blog and everybody's stuff that people up here have written about how to test that. But it was just always so much harder to go back in, especially when we look at things now today with deduplication and compression and things like that. Everybody's like, hey, how much deduplication am I going to get on this workload? I'm like, I have no idea. And if I could tell you, I would be retired because I'd be selling that to all the other storage companies right now.
Can we talk later about how to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh.
Are we starting a company?
Hardware footprint's another one.
Say again?
Hardware footprint, the sizing, because most organizations want to reduce their hardware footprint in the data center. So if your storage appliance is bigger than I am, most likely it's probably going to get turned away. I want something small, compact, that can fit in the rack, but it's going to give me oodles of storage.
And by virtue of all the answers you've heard, the original question is, what's the one thing? And when you first asked it, it's like, oh, there's no one thing. Yeah. And I think everybody kind of just proved that out. There isn't one thing. And any customer that kind of bases a decision on one thing is probably going to end up with the wrong thing. Because storage it can be complex, and it can be a complex decision-making process.
Well, I think in conjunction with that, it's the kind of the one thing question there. It really depends on the workload, right? I mean, if you're setting up just let's say a dedicated Exchange environment for 100,000 employees, that type of thing, you may silo that and isolate that. I think that just depending on what the particular use case is, whether you're running a generalistic workload with some high utilization systems, then you could probably go with a generic offering. But you could, depending on the scale, you could go with a particular dedicated solution from a siloed perspective. We're going to have a team just for this, or a team just for this, or a rave just for that. That's entirely conceivable. It really just depends on the scale and the use case.
Well, storage isn't one size fits all.
No, it's not.
I look at it as like buying a car. So you've got your flash storage. That's like a Corvette, a Porsche. But are you going to put a car seat in a Porsche? Probably not. So,
If you bought the abomination
if
that
you
is a
have a baby.
Panamera, you would.
Why not? Why not? You can put a car seat. Oh yeah. Why not?
is it practical? Looks kind of funny having
So that's perspective, right?
True. So you've got your flash storage. Now, I probably wouldn't run a print server on there.
No.
Or just regular files. I know I wouldn't, because that's not going to bring me the best bang for my buck from a storage perspective.
So
now, if I
with
had a
that-
minivan, that's great for files.
Well, with that being said, though, I would dare to say that most people that either work for vendors or work for VARs or other partners, there have been times where we've seen, we've come into an organization and we've seen some killer array, and the only thing that was running on it was, like 5 VMs or
DNS.
something like that. We've
It's
seen
really
that,
fast, too.
Yeah. Oh, this is awesome, and especially my time in the military, I saw a lot of that, and it's like, we don't touch this. This is just for this. And that type of thing. So it happens, but the hard part is finding that happy medium of the right performance, right capacity, the prices appropriate for those, as well as the management, and as well as future supportability. We didn't even cover that.
And the thing that just keeps going through my mind, I'm trying to play off your analogy that you said, you wouldn't Corvette, and the technology is changing so fast. Is that 2 years from now, that VW Bug that you were the minivan you're talking about could be able to go as fast as a Corvette, and you're going to be able to buy that for a lot cheaper than a Corvette costs today.
Maybe I don't need my minivan anymore, and I want a convertible now. I'm going through a midlife crisis, and I want my fast car. It may be
Buy a Jeep. Just buy a Jeep. Call it a day.
I'll get a Range Rover. But I think just like life, certain times you want something else. And then, in the future, I may want a minivan again when I get old and I want to travel, and throw everything in there. So maybe I want that big
So are we
monolithic
doing a
server.
vacation panel now? So can we switch this into kind of talking about vacations?
Talk about RVs.
And let's head back to Moab.
I'm gonna get the Canyonero. My seat's 25 and smells like a steak. That'll be kind of the car I can get the kind of utility that I want out of.
Just buy a hybrid.
There you go.
You live in
Hybrid
California?
storage.
You live in California?
I do live in California. The Tesla X is coming out.
Tesla, the Honda Accord of Silicon Valley.
It is that bad.
Okay, one more before we get to the vacation topics. Flash has been positioned as the ultimate solution for fixing storage. Is that true?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Flash has been positioned as the ultimate solution for fixing storage. Is that true?
I think it depends. Maybe in some cases, yeah. But then you also have to look at the application. For instance, a couple weeks ago, I had a server that was just going out of control. And this is more CPU and memory resource, but I had an engineer say, oh, I need more RAM. I need more CPU. And I'm like, at some point you have to stop. It's still going to eat up everything. Get back to the application and find out what's going on. You could have something wrong there, and after 24 hours of digging into it and screaming at the vendor
Bad
a couple
SQL
times,
query.
Bad indexes. So with 48 hours later, I took all the resources back and said, here you go. I don't need them because it was the application.
The fastest storage in the world will not unscrew a bad query.
Exactly.
Good.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, but then you add that index. You add that index, and now your query is super fast, and now then you've destroyed insert rates, for example. So everything's a trade-off.
Well, if you want to talk about is Flash going to solve all our storage problems? I don't think Flash is a medium. It's a different approach to how you store your data, and it has different trade-offs associated with it versus spinning disks. And there's use cases for both solutions. And I don't see Flash overtaking the data center in its entirety. I see it taking over a certain segmentation of workloads, and as it becomes more mature and it grows and changes, it may become the more dominant storage medium. But the reality is, a spinning disk, just like tape, neither are going away, right?
Wait, can I clarify the question?
Yeah.
Are you talking Flash, the storage medium, or are you talking about general persistent storage mediums that have consistent access times? Because if you're talking about that, right, there's things like late 2016, early 2017, we're talking about things like carbon nanotube memory, which are not Flash. They are multiple orders of magnitude faster than Flash, but nonetheless, they still have many of the same fundamental characteristics in terms of like consistent access times regardless of of location on media and things like that. So are you talking flash, the media,
That was a
or are we
good
talking
segue,
about
actually.
that larger group?
That was a great segue because that was the next question.
Okay.
Cross point. I mean, we're gonna go start talking about all the esoteric new things. I mean, if you're in that space, the flash memory space, NVMe, all of these different technologies that are coming out, PCM, some that have been on the road for much longer than normal or that we would expect, and then others. The time it takes to bring a technology like that to market and make it accessible to the masses is, we're still talking about the Intel stuff right now as if like, oh my God, it's going to crush the industry. I'm like, it's going to crush the industry maybe in 3 to 5 years, and by then, who knows what storage looks like.
Well, I think the way we need to think about storage, though, it's not, is it flash? Is it the next big thing that's coming? Is it some DNA-based means of getting storage? And really, what was storage created for? And it was created to do two things. It was created to deliver I/O, and it was created to protect the I/O. And at some level, we don't want to care what the medium is behind it. I mean, I think we need to stop caring about the medium. It's whether or not you have an architecture or platform that can deliver the I/O and can protect the I/O. And at the end of the day, hopefully, we don't really care about what the storage medium is. It comes down to just being able to do those two things.
Yeah, I think nowadays it really masks a lot of problems that applications inherently have. I know that I'll say a homegrown application at the company that I worked for previous to EMC, it was horrible. I mean, the queries, like you said, Gabe, I mean, they were unbelievable. And it took them, I want to say, 2 people for the better part of 9 months to fix most of their performance problems. Flash hadn't really proliferated at that point where they could have put it in place where it would have made a difference. I would dare to say it probably would have been faster, but if they had tried to scale that application even further, even with Flash, they could have potentially run into some bottlenecks. So I think right now it kind of masks a lot of problems that people see, but at the same time, especially the way we do things in vSAN, as well as kind of what some of the other vendors here have done from a caching tier, we do provide some enabling capabilities with Flash. So it's a mix, but as far as being the savior or the end-all be-all, I agree with the rest of the panelists that it's not.
I think it's okay to use a heavy flash-based caching tier or even an all-flash array to hide your performance problems or to at least sweep them under the rug a little bit. If you recognize that, all right, you bought this thing, you're going to use it for 3 years, your job now for 3 years is not to just say, fix that problem, but instead is to say, all right, I have now 3 years to un-F this up and fundamentally fix my application. So I think it's okay to sweep your stuff under the rug as long as you don't forget that you swept it there.
Well, the challenge there is it important to the business unit now that it does work for them to take away from other resources, right?
I'm willing to bet that if that application has issues around like query performance and things like that, it's probably due for a rebuild.
At some point, you're going to throw the Band-Aid off.
Has anybody in here had a horrible application where they said, just throw hardware at it?
Oh yeah, sure, I've done that too.
I mean,
it's called Splunk.
I heard that repeatedly. Repeatedly. Throw hardware at it because we can buy hardware cheaper than we can pay devs, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll mask things definitely, and I think as solutions move over to more of a, let's say, DevOps approach, maybe we've got a little bit more, we're paying a little bit more attention to these applications and how to really make them perform well. But I mean, the guys that I used to work with, good luck with that. It was horrible.
So in our last 3 minutes, we've touched on virtualized storage, we've touched on Flash, and a little bit on hyper-converged infrastructures. What is the next big thing for storage?
What is the next big thing for storage?
Ooh.
3 minutes and counting.
I'm going to say application-specific storage. So, you'll go out to the floor tomorrow, or tomorrow night when it opens, and
Tonight.
And it'll be Docker, right?
Doctor Who.
Yeah, exactly, right.
It's Doctor Who.
Thing.
And so everybody will be like, yeah, we support Docker, and the Docker fanboyness aside, bringing storage closer to the applications that consume it themselves You can see sort of touches of this on like Oracle, like what Oracle does with ASM and things like that, where they have their own, fundamentally their own file system and volume manager that manages their storage for them. I think we'll probably start to see more and more of that, where we are quite literally giving storage directly to an application, whether it's through Docker or AppC or Cloud Foundry or whatever, and we're not trying to layer it through VMFS and then a VM and then an application and things like that.
Would it be great if we could tie a policy to that?
Jesus.
With SPBM?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I kind of echo Matt's discussion there, and I think what you'll start to see is more and more. I mean, go back 4 or 5 years, you start to hear things about Rocky, RDMA over converged Ethernet. It's more a grid approach. We'll start to see. Hopefully, we start to see applications that can take advantage of these more distributed environments and access and share memory as well as disk capacity internally across server nodes, or kind of that kind of hybrid approach, and inject back into an actual larger storage portion in what you would traditionally look at as storage array, making a more cohesive solution that's almost like a rack scale unit of measurement to bring applications to the market. And that solution or that platform is designed specifically for that kind of application, these Web 2.0 kind of apps. If you look at what the really big dogs like Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and all of them do, they do very specific approaches to that kind of distributed workload management to deliver the things we get on our phones on a day in and day out basis. As more organizations move towards that kind of delivery model, you'll start to see a re-architecture of not only just the applications themselves, but those applications will in turn direct what the hardware component looks like.
Okay,
Gobbledygook.
awesome. Well, I think that's our time. So my thanks to the panel and to the audience. I think we're all set.